changed for the better.
Bring me the broom of the wicked witch of the West.
For a while there, I thought you changed.
I have changed.
It's time for both of us to fly!
Because I knew you.
You're the only friend I ever had.
Because I knew you.
And I've had so many friends.
I have been changed for good.
But only one that mattered.
I'm off to see the wizard.
Hello, and welcome to the Mix Awards Season video series, Film Sound Edition. I'm Tom Kenny with Mix Magazine, and I'm here with the sound team of Wicked for Good. These 5 members were all the sound team for Wicked Part 1, nominated for Best Sound for an Oscar last year, and they returned. These 5 have been living in Oz for years. Simon, let's start with you, production sound. These are sets. They're big sets. It's magical. It's colorful, visual, but it still starts with that rich dialogue. We have to live in the world, in the sort of natural world. Last time we talked, you focused on sort of a tight, close-up dialogue to give room in post-production. Did you do anything different this time around? I mean, you had a well-oiled machine last time. What's new?
You know, Tom, we shot these 2 movies back to back, so we kind of got very used to our workflow, and we continued trying to shoot as tight as possible on the dialogue so that there was no transition into the closely mic'd live singing. That's what Andy and I always spoke about when we discussed any live singing on Wicked, and it's something that became our mantra, that I wanted to really supply tight dialogue for Nancy and Robin Bainton, our vocal editor, so that when they collaborated on the dialogues and the vocal editing, there was no transition, there was no space around the dialogue going into what needed to be closely mic'd singing. What was different on Wicked for Good was that we lent so much more into the live keyboard. We really, these songs really required giving more freedom to Ari and more freedom to Cynthia, and allowing them to really let their acting take the priority and just have a very light keyboard accompaniment. So what it was all about for me was, okay, we knew how we were going to get the live singing and the live dialogue, but it was about how we were going to give the freedom to them, but still supply good tempo without going completely off tempo grid for Jack. And the way that we did that was we caught the MIDI on the keyboard accompaniment and just basically tried whenever possible. Our keyboard accompanist, Ben Holder, who was the music associate, was always told, listen, don't lead the girls, just let them lead you, just be very, very sensitive and accompany them. But at the same time, what we were doing secretly was we were playing a click into his ear so that he could try and keep that tempo. And even if they wanted to take a moment to reflect or take a breath, he was able to still come back in on that click. And, you know, a few times I saw him kind of rip the IEM out because it just wasn't working. But most of the time he had that click. Ari and Cynthia didn't know that click was there. I'm sure they probably sensed it, but they didn't feel restricted by that click. That was just a guide for him so that we could really make sure that the orchestration afterwards could work to some kind of tempo grid.
Jack, I mean, how does that work for him? Is that a godsend for you to have this as you carry through the edit? Where does that go?
It absolutely is a godsend, because when we're building these sequences, we're often choosing between different visual takes and hoping to, when all is said and done, recreate the musical structure that is implied by the piece of music. So when you have such a strict adherence to the musical structure via these click tracks and these tempo maps that Simon's describing, it allows us to take the different visual takes and stitch them together in a way that keeps the music cohesive. So without that workflow during production, it would be quite difficult to make it work in post-production.
that's the guide. But the difference in film versus a recording studio, for instance, is they're going to vary with their acting. They're emoting on stage too. They're not singing a straight song necessarily. They've got different pacing. So how do you deal with that? And Andy, jump in too if you'd like, because it's isn't the same as a soundtrack album.
Well, it's not the same as a soundtrack album, obviously, because you are dealing with performance and visual capture. So, but I love listening to how Simon describes this because, with all the intricacy and all the variations that go into this, that end up in front of Jack to then go through orchestrations, things. I end up with these sort of beautiful tracks on the mixing board because of all this incredible work that everyone's done. And it's easy to overlook this work because the reason that, I think the film has so much power in its performance is this very capture. The fact that there is no sense of a playback. There is no sense of trying to lip sync something. It's just happening there as if you're in the theater watching them on stage in front of you. And that's why I think it communicates to the audience so beautifully. And it takes an awful lot of work to get it to that level. But it's just a dream to work on this is like a village. We're all a village. It takes a lot of people to bring a soundtrack like this to the final theater. And everybody has to be working at top notch. And I think that's the skill level on this was so high, and the desire leading from Stephen Schwartz down through John Chu to make this something that was really connective. And I think that comes back to exactly the way that Simon captured it and the way that Jack was able to manipulate that. And then with all the dialogue with Nancy and the sound work with John Marquis, the design work, I think that's where all these threads came together. And I think we all were very happy with that.
Was it the same setup with the recording studio on set, I presume, and everything? And Greg Wells in the studio. Jack, were you on set at times? Or?
I was during the initial production in 2023. I was there for a few weeks as we were beginning to put sequences together. And yes, that recording studio that was built literally on the site of Elstree Studios was used for all of our pre-recorded vocals, all of our pre-recorded instrumentals. And it was a huge resource for us because at any given moment, we could go into the studio, make changes to the instrumentation that was used for the demo recordings on set. And it was a fluid workflow for that reason.
And Simon, does that help make your job easier in any way, shape, or form?
Well, you know what, Tom? We had to have those pre-records because we couldn't be sure when we started whether Cynthia and Ari could sing for 11 hours a day non-stop. That's an unknown quantity. Of course, they proved very, very quickly that wasn't going to be a problem, but no one knew that. We were also just coming out of COVID. We didn't know if anyone was going to get sick. We also didn't know if someone was going to lose their voice. So we needed to have that in our back pocket just in case. It became super clear that John really wanted to go live. Every week, John would go off at the weekend into Myron's cutting room, and we'd come back and John would just say, the live takes are what we want. That's what we're going to use. And we would just lean more and more into live. So by week 3 of the shoot, we weren't really shooting anything to lip sync at all. The notion that we should do a safety take to lip sync went out of the window, and we put all of our efforts into shooting live. However, we still had to do choreography rehearsals. We still had to send the second unit team off to do shots with stand-ins, and so they needed those pre-records. We didn't have the ability to just to have people singing live on the set for all of those splinter units and second units. So it was really helpful having all of that. And the other thing was that we used Greg's pre-records. Of course, what we did was we stripped the vocals from them, so Ari and Cynthia couldn't hear their own vocals, but we were using Greg's backing tracks. And on a lot of the songs, what we were doing was we were giving Ari and Cynthia complete freedom for the first verse to take them into the song. And then at the bar where the bass line came in or the percussion, that would be where we would do a quick fade across from live keyboard into Pro Tools playback of Greg's fantastic backing track, because we knew at that point we absolutely had to have tempo lock. So we were weaving in and out and giving the actors complete freedom with the keyboard when we could, but when we knew that we had to be locked, we would fade across at a certain bar number and then we're into Greg's track.
Nancy, when we talked last year, I think I remember you closed the conversation by saying, "Well, we're looking forward to part 2. We have our templates in place." As if it was going to be a walk in the park. I'm sure it was not a walk in the park. So, tell me your experience here. You have templates set up. You know what to expect. What's new, and how did it go?
Yeah, I did not mean to imply that we thought it would be a walk in the park, but we definitely had systems in place. We literally had the same crew continue in the same rooms, same workflow, same everything. So we didn't have that, wind up period that you always do on any new project, which was really a gift. I mean, we were just able to hit the ground running, and we already had our lines of communication. And so I think John has said in the past that we ended with reel 8 of part 1, and then we started with reel 9, beginning with part 2. We just kept going. It was really a gift.
Anything surprise you this time around? Did anything a challenge you weren't expecting? At the end of part 1, we're introduced to the cape and the broom. She takes off, but a lot more of that this time around. What's new from your point of view?
Yeah, well, there's those were just introduced right at the very end of the movie, so we barely got a taste of the power of what was to come. But and for good, there's just a lot more story happening in between the songs. There's a lot. I mean, John and even Stephen Schwartz, for that matter, everyone's Mark Platt are very involved in the world building of Oz and the songs. Everything's kind of homogenous, so we don't have these moments of just pure ambient, world building. It's all part and parcel with the music, whether it's song or whether it's score. The difference this time around was it just seemed like there was a lot more things happening in between the songs, which gave us a lot more kind of fun to play with the score, that we didn't exactly have all that rich material in part 1. The cyclone being one of the big moments, the stampede. There's a whole host of really fun moments.
We get Dorothy this time around, right? I mean,
we get Dorothy, we get the Tin Man, we get the Scarecrow, we get all these amazing, parts of cinema history. It's incredible. You just kind of pinch yourself that you're a part of. Like, well, this is the visceral nature. This is the realism, maybe the subjective realism, I guess you can say that of the cyclone, that the wicked that we don't know, but that has been magically drummed up.
Madame Morrible.
Madame Morrible.
Madame Morrible is there. Well, that's the connection with Dorothy, that we bring it back to what we all grew up with as kids. We do get the Cowardly Lion, the Tin Man and the Scarecrow. Their transformations are sometimes violent transformations. Can you walk me through those scenes, especially the Tin Man when he sure did?
I mean, the thing that's John's always, it's a violent transformation, but a lot of the times we're working with like quiet power, the sense of the mystery and the magic, and not the necessarily scenes that kind of like would cry out for a standard, spectacle of sound design. It's kind of more about these impressions of emotions, and the in the Tin Man's transformation. There's a lot going on. There's the fear. There's like a love and a compassion happening with Elphaba, just trying to save Bach in any way she knows how. She doesn't know how she's going to save him, and so it's just kind of playing with a kind of the surreal subjectiveness of those moments, as opposed to some of the literal things. She was very into playing up some of the more ugly sounds, I guess, of metal and tin, the clunkiness. But we ended it all, kind of tightened it with a bow at the end with these beautiful little caps to the thumb, the fingertips, that just kind of help us ring out into Marissa's last line.
How do you work? Do you and Jack work together tightly on a scene like that then, where there's music? I mean, it's sometimes frightening music. Jack,
I mean, absolutely. Jack and I are like, I mean, the whole team for that matter is we're all kind of humming in the same frequencies, trying to get the emotion that the scene's calling for. And so Jack and I have a real good shorthand with everyone else in the room too, in regards to just kind of like how we're occupying space editorially, and then we get in with Andy and I working in regards to just kind of the balances between what's happening in the sound design and the music and dialogue and vocals at that moment. But Jack and I are working all the time in regards to tempo, tonality, harmonies, keys, structure, all that kind of stuff. It's the seemingly mundane sounds that have to be tuned and tempo mapped, as well as the more grand things that are obviously set pieces that need that kind of detail as well.
Jack, do you want to add to that? Are those challenging scenes for you?
They completely are. And the one thing that occurs to me when you talk about the Tin Man transformation is that transformation happens toward the end of a long sequence, and the song in that sequence is The Wicked Witch of the East. Yeah. The Wicked Witch of the East is a non-traditional song in a musical, in the sense that really what's happening in that scene is a deeply dramatic dialogue scene in which the singing is sort of sprinkled in these bursts of emotion. And so what makes that scene uniquely challenging is that to come in and out of the songs, you have to do so in a way that captures the overall arc and drama of that scene that is essentially, as I said, a dialogue scene between Bach, Nessa, and Elphaba. And what's happening throughout that scene is the tension is building. Elphaba is starting to use the grimoire to create magic. So we have all the sounds of the grimoire, that kind of very deep sort of energy that John created. Plus you have a huge amount of sporadic dialogue happening between the characters, and then it flows in and out of dialogue, in and out of singing. And by the end of it, it culminates with this transformation. So to get there, there's a huge amount of coordination. And I remember that scene in particular took a lot of work, because you don't want it to feel melodramatic. You want it to feel natural. You want it to feel emotional. You want it to feel deeply painful for Nessa and for Bach, but you also want it to flow dramatically according to John Chu's vision. So it's great that you mentioned that scene, because that scene, people might not realize, actually has a huge amount of coordination between all of us to get it right.
I believe it. And Nancy, you have to get that dialogue through, and Andy, you have to bring all of this together. I mean, as one sort of unified peak at the end.
One thing I will add to that from Jack and John was that the score came in a little bit later on this mix than on the first film, and for a variety of reasons. But the funny thing was that big scenes like that literally all came together on the mixing stage at the very end. And John, had to sort of almost wait to hear exactly where the score was going to end up, coming in and out of the song, obviously, because the orchestrations for the song were done at one point in time, and then the score recording was done at a different point in time. And then Jack had to magically marry these together, constantly going in and out from a piece of recorded song orchestration to John Powell's score. And then along with that comes John Marquis's sound design. So everything had to sort of come in together. We literally were all in the room discovering these scenes almost at the end. Which I think is part of why, the charm of it in some ways was that it wasn't overly thought through. We just had to work with what we ended up with. No, I mean, it was worked through and thought, but we had to fit. It wasn't until we could put it up on the stage and really hear it that we decided how those scenes would come together. And it was definitely a challenge, but tremendous fun to do.
Another scene I'd like to sort of bring up is the wedding scene, where there's a whole lot of sort of betrayals and sacrifice going on, and then we discover the animals downstairs, and we have this back and forth with the picture edit between this beautiful cathedral-like wedding and a dingy basement where the captains are being set free. Could you talk about that scene a little bit, maybe? Simon? We haven't heard from you in a minute. How's the wedding scene for you?
It's just really about trying to make sure that every word of dialogue is close so that we can build up, so that I can give the freedom to John and Andy to really, really build the tension and to build all of the atmospheres and not have to hold back the volume of the score, not have to hold back the volume of the sound effects and the sound design in any way because they haven't got that really rich dialogue. So again, it's just that mantra of the dialogue has to be rich. I'm not EQing anything on the set. I'm sending it all to Nancy as flat as possible. I think I'm putting a bass cut in at 60 hertz. Apart from that, it's flat. And I'm just trying to get it as rich as possible so that these guys on the mix stage are not having to be restricted by any kind of space around the dialogue or any kind of thinness in the dialogue. So it really is just chunky, and they can drive that sound design and that score underneath it, and it can live with that.
The wedding, the stampede actually was one of the most challenging, I think, scenes for us that we worked on the longest and revisited many, many times because of all of the elements involved, and just wanting the stakes to be really, really high and really terrifying. And even the approach of the animals coming to the door before they burst through, we did that, like many, many versions of that before we kind of got it down to where it seemed appropriate. And, going through with all those animals and having the score come in a little later in the schedule than we did last time, you want to make sure that monkey screeching by is not canceling out the screech of the woman who's falling from the ceiling or competing with the string section and the horns and the animals mooing and roaring. There's a lot competing there, but still trying to pick out the right elements to feature and at the right frequencies. That was a one we spent a lot of time on.
And it starts distant, if I'm not mistaken. They hear sounds in the distance is when they're first aware of the animals. They're like, what's going on out there in the middle of the way? John, it's another busy scene, but I heard everything. Lots of animals in there, lots of different ones, lots of variety. Can you talk about that scene?
It's one of those challenging things of like, just make it chaotic. It seems easy, right? Turn everything up. Let's hear it all. It's chaos. It's like, no, it's not. Not at all. It's the most organized chaos you've ever experienced, and it's kind of like there was many passes because it kind of boils down to like where's our attention, what's our attention in this moment, and sometimes that would vary depending on the day, depending on who's giving us the note. But it was all about getting the detail, and it took many passes to get through and just make sure that we're featuring what we need out of the score to communicate the emotional driving force of all this stuff, and then like which animals really matter, and what's the, it's like you want to give the impression of the stampede nonstop, but you can't literally do that. So it's just about picking your moments, and then the audience kind of fills in the gap in between all that stuff.
It's almost like right leading up to it, right before. This is where Alphaba discovers it's not going to change. They've betrayed me. I mean, so there's this build up, and it's almost like it's a release in a way. Like, some of the rage comes out. Jack, Andy, you want to jump in, because that's putting that together where you have to pick out every detail.
I think one thing I would say is that when we did the scene, obviously in a musical, you're tending to think, okay, should music drive? In a scene like that, clearly it didn't need to drive. So I think first or second pass through with John, we're putting all the pieces together, which he did so brilliantly. And then Myron or John would come in and go, okay, let's make it more. Let's have more fun. So then John would do another pass. And I think one night I left early and left John just to put even more animals in, because you couldn't have enough of them. It was one of those scenes that just had to be this wonderful, chaotic, entourage of just crazy animals and crazy sounds. And the music then was able to sit and be a little bit of a binding force, but it didn't have to drive it. It should never have driven it. It was meant to be, a visual effect sequence. And but it took a while to get there. That's for sure.
If you're in that crowd, you don't have any idea what's going on if you're at the wedding right there. Another scene that really struck me is the cyclone. The twister, we called it, the American version. Now they're calling it cyclone. But this is where we bring the Dorothy and everything together. Nancy, you mentioned something about the cyclone earlier. What was your role in the big dramatic?
My role wasn't as great. I mean, Marquis and the design team did the heavy lifting on that, but it was definitely an incredible sound opportunity that didn't quite have those kinds of opportunities in part one. And I mean, John, you can speak to this, of course, but it was one of those things that went kind of around in a circle. We'd get VFX and more detail would come in, more things would be flying by, and so the guys would be adding more and more things, and it ended up being, it ended up being more powerful, just stripped back a little bit to its base force.
John, are you making use of the whole theater there? Because I mean, when Madame Marble throws her hands up, it's almost like a vertical.
Yeah, I mean that's the beauty of we mixed native Atmos, and so there was just a lot of space for everyone to have their cake and eat it too, kind of stuff. So that particular scene is what I love is just how it starts out very kind of small and gestural and just kind of focusing on these wind elements that just slowly get to build, and before we know it, we're kind of like in the throes of this really kind of tonal, not typical kind of like white noise kind of
it's
blast,
like
low frequency
animal
thing. Just, we were having a
growling.
lot of fun with just the tonality of what's the emotional character of this cyclone, and kind of playing up those types of moments.
Andy, you want to add to that? Are you moving stuff? Or are you playing?
I'd say the use of Atmos in this film was fabulous, because not only for me, I love Atmos for music because I feel the clarity and the immersiveness of it is unique. And I mean, there's in the entire score for this film is actually coming out of every single speaker in that room. Every single speaker in any cinema has actually got music in it at all times. Everything is obviously leaning towards the screen because that's where the story is. But what I love about it is you don't even notice it's there, but it just fills it. And I think that's the beauty of Atmos. And I think when it unleashes a sequence like the cyclone for John, you can have so much fun with that. And then you return to that lovely kind of gentleness. You can go as quiet as a pin or as big as you want. And there's no other system that really lets you do that. And I think we really tried to utilize that. Yeah.
And I think when we think of a cyclone, we think effects. There's music in there, though, Jack. I mean, it is that sort of space allows you to come in when you can, right?
Yeah, I mean, the cyclone is such a force. It's a full frequency sound. It's going to take up the entire aural experience, but you need to tell story with music as well. You need to establish Morable's theme, which John Powell and Stephen Schwartz did brilliantly there. It makes me realize and remember that orchestration and the choice of which instrument to play at any given moment, those are essentially mix decisions in a way. And John Powell did that brilliantly during the cyclone sequence, because as Morable's beginning her dance, as it were, getting the weather going, there's room in the mix for short strings to be giving you some momentum. But then as soon as that cyclone hits, there's not a lot of room left in the mix for the frequency of the strings, the mid-range frequency of the strings. So we hand off to big French horn phrases playing Morable's tune, and we try to get out of the way so that those close-up images of destruction and the cyclone and the yellow brick road bricks being, ripped up, those can take center stage. And so we're very privileged to work with composers who understand the eventual mix considerations that we're going to have on the final dub, and to allow those decisions to influence their orchestrational decisions earlier. And I think that the cyclone is a wonderful example of that, because you still hear the narrative power of the music, but it's not getting in the way of the main event, which is that incredible, powerful cyclone.
It's one of the things that impressed me about this movie is it's obviously about music and songs. They take the lead in so many instances, but there's a great dive, and there's also some exaggerated effects in there. I forget if it was a door close or something. There was some great sort of amplified effects that found their spot. There's not a lot of them, but they found their spot. That's intentional, I presume.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the thing that's so amazing about John and all the filmmakers here. Is that, I mean, they're very much. Everything's an instrument. Everything plays a part. It's all one big tapestry of musical tapestry, but some of it's played with traditional instruments, and some of it's a door, You know, these are all things that are emotional storytelling devices. And the doors were kind of a big thing in this movie. Repeatedly, we'd find ourselves circling back to address a door note. So,
well, there's the doors at a certain point were thunder leading into the cyclone. I mean, I felt like doors are opening to thunder. And rhythm plays a big part there. There's mechanical gears. There's always something. There's like a flintlock gun, you know, for some reason. It's like a 1840s gun or something. But can you talk about rhythm, Nancy? Fire away. Because the dialogue has a rhythm, the songs have a rhythm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even the effects have a rhythm.
It's great that we've been doing these interviews and stuff and getting to see the, you know, production designer and even hair and makeup, you know, all of that, like the detail that they put into every single item that is on the screen, whether it's large or small. We got to play off of that and reflect that in the sound, in everything, the clarity of the dialogue. I mean, reflects, you know, the image, the pristine nature of everything that we see on set. And like and I always come back to like my favorite sound effect in part 2 is Madame Morrible's typewriter. You know, I mean, who thought that up? It's a genius design. It's so brilliant, and the way that it moves and it works, and then to be able to add the sound to that is Aussian, but has a very mechanical, you know, natural sound to it. And I mean, those are really fun opportunities to have. And it all starts with the, you know, it's all ingrained in the story.
John, at a certain point, your effects are very musical. I mean, you're being so tied to the music editor because the entire rhythm of the track sort of flows that way. I do have other scenes that I wanted to talk about, but we're running out of time, including the finale, where it comes down to the, you know, Elfie and Glinda one-on-one. It's touching at the end when they have to sort of separate. But can we go around and pick a favorite scene, Simon? You lived in this for 3 years. One that was either challenging or you got a good satisfaction out of. What's one for you?
Well, look, before we start discussing For Good, which was my personal favorite, but let's talk about No Good Deed, because again, Cynthia's flying through the air. She's flying close to flames. We've got silent wind machines on her. I'm begging the special effects department not to hit the brim of her hat with the focused silent wind. You know, I'm saying, guys, can you just avoid her face, because we don't want to have tears streaming down her cheeks from the wind hitting her eyes. But at the same time, we need to see her costume billowing to sell the fact that she's flying through the air. And if we keep it off her face, we're keeping it out of the peak of her hat, which is where the microphone is. We couldn't boom that, obviously, because she's flying on wires. And so we were literally relying on 2 lav mics, one in her lapel, which was really just a safety. That was getting a lot of wind. The mic, which I know made its way into the final mix, mainly was the lav in the peak of her hat, which was just, again, a full-range DPA, which caught Cynthia's voice so well. You know, look, Tom, I'm not going to say it sounded as good as a Studio U87, but it wasn't far off, right? It was very, very tight. And the wonderful thing about the peak of the hat is wherever her head goes, that microphone goes with her. Now, to be able to capture that singing when she's flying on those wires and she's getting hit with that level of special effects wind was just something extraordinary. And I know that there was some talk in the final mix about whether to go with the live or whether to pick up pre-records. And guys, wasn't there one particular place Robin Bainton was telling me where she got hit with really big wind and you guys had to save that live vocal and it made its way into the mix?
That's 100% correct. To this day, I am still shocked at how we were able to use the live vocal in No Good Deed, which is the most perhaps the most dynamic scene in either movie. There's so much going on in that scene, and so much on the effects side, but also the instrumentation of No Good Deed is probably Stephen Schwartz's most complex instrumentation and orchestration of any song in either movie. So the fact that we were able to save that particular line that Simon just referenced, but also use the vocal in general, is a nod not only to the recording techniques and all of our work on the final mix, but also to the power of Cynthia Erivo herself for having the power in that live performance that was captured in those microphones on set.
Absolutely agree. The vocal just soared, and for such a big scene, as Jack said, you've got these powerful orchestrations going, which were amazing to put her voice to. But then all the effects work that was done with John, because of the visuals, where she was, visibly in the scene. I can't tell you how tricky that was to pull together, and yet every time we ran it, it just stood up so strong and so powerful because it was dominated by her incredible vocal all the way through. And no matter what level I played it at, it was always just soaring and big and rich and full. And it allowed for all this other work to come in around it so beautifully. And it was, I mean, she had some practice on Gravity, right, Simon? So that was a good dress rehearsal for No Good Deed.
It really was, Andy, but there's something about her vocal when she's actually doing the physicality of those acrobatic moves on wires that just brings it to life. And we listened when we were rehearsing, we didn't want her to sing and put herself through that and perhaps use up her vocal in rehearsals. And so we were actually playing out the speakers, the pre-record, and then we'd go to obviously the live when we started shooting on the camera. And every time I heard her sing it live, I was just like, this has something that the pre-record doesn't. There's a physicality and a life in this vocal that doesn't exist in the pre-record. You can hear the effort that she's putting in to her physical movement.
Well, I mean, I've always likened it to being on stage. I mean, it's just they walk out on stage and you're going to get a unique performance that you're not going to get without an audience and a sense of occasion. And I think that's what you get from this is once the camera turned over, she suddenly was in a major performance piece that you could never capture in a pre-record in some ways.
It sounds like they tried to keep that stage vibe throughout all the production in a way, sort of that live sense. Nancy, any particular scene that 10 years from now you're going to be thinking that was pretty cool?
This whole experience is something I'm going to be reflecting on for a long, long time. But no, adding on to actually what everyone was saying about No Good Deed, and also the another one of the most powerful song pieces in the movie, For Good. I mean, the planets really have to align for either of those scenes to be represented as they were. Like, you have to have two incredible vocalists that are just masters of their instruments and can control their singing to this incredible degree, because particularly in For Good, they're singing together. They're a foot apart from each other. So there's no separation. And they are essentially mixing their vocals through their performance. And then you have to have Simon and his team miking it the way that they were able to, and with the cooperation of all the other departments that allowed that to happen. It really just has to be every part of it has to be just right. And we were just so lucky to have those
I hear it in the recording industry all the time that a really powerful singer almost mixes themselves.
Exactly. That's
in
true.
that performance, you get to feel that. John, nobody comes out whistling the effects, right? So, but
no, but they come out stomping. They do the footsteps. They do all the stuff, the other things.
All
for
that
sure.
Foley. What's one of your, when you look back 10 years from now, what's one of the scenes you're proud of and it will really stand out for you?
Yeah, I mean, these two scenes we're talking about for sure. I mean, I love the full frequency. I love all the emotional, just level 11, what's happening in No Good Deed, and the fact that there's so much visual information and storytelling happening outside of just the vocal. But there's so much trickery going on in regards to just how we're able to compress and get small and get large, and the dynamics in that is really, really happy with how we were able to kind of manage that, so we could keep it all kind of full and intimate feeling, but still able to kind of like expand and contrast the the kind of the close
It's very,
perspective and the
it's very,
full range
it
stuff.
does go from big to intimate, pretty sharp scenes sometimes.
Yeah, which was just beautiful. But I think For Good for me is just I love it because it's so the subtlety of it. Every little thing it's and we've talked about this before. It's almost like the quieter the scene, the more intimate and delicate it is, the more powerful it is, and the easier it is to completely ruin it. It just takes a lot more work. It's subtle work to get through it. And then for me, I'm really happy with just how we were able to maintain the world, maintain the magic of the world that they live in, while we're able to just solely focus on the girls. Because if the world wasn't there, I mean, we'd still be hearing their vocals, but you know, you might be apt to think it's on the stage. There's all these other little things that kind of like creep in. But I was just happy with how that turned out, how we were able to kind of, again, contrast, contract, and expand the world around them to kind of like really tune in and focus on the emotional content that they were
Jack, we'll come to you last, because this must, of all the films you worked on, this probably has to be at least the top the amount of music and the variety of music. I mean, the score, the songs, they have to weave together.
100%. It doesn't get better for a music editor to be part of something at this scale. I will be grateful for this for the rest of my life. It's been so rewarding. What I'll say about For Good, there's so much that can be said about For Good, but what I will say from my perspective is that when that song starts, when Elphaba says, "I'm limited," when she sings, "I'm limited," everyone is breathless. Every audience member on Earth is breathless. Everyone in the production process is breathless. We are waiting for their performances. We have no one has any right to get ahead of Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo and those two characters in that moment. And so in a musical, you're always striving for the song to start in the most natural, inevitable way that is a extension of the characters. It's not the feeling of, oh, there's a song starting. It's that there's no other way for them to express the emotion that they're experiencing in that moment. And so when that song starts, we are beholden to their performance. We're waiting for it to blossom. And the way that intro section was captured, and Simon talked about it earlier with the live piano on set, everyone is just waiting for their singing and their performance to lead the charge. And so for all of us in making that song, we were led by them. We were led by John Shu's vision of how he wanted that scene to unfold, and we let the story and the characters do the heavy lifting for us. We were just there at the service of that. And I'm so immensely proud of how that song begins and how it just sort of slowly starts to blossom and then just rips your heart out. And I think that of all the songs, that's the one that feels the most natural and the most satisfying to me.
That's a perfect closing, Jack. Thank you. But I want to thank you for coming out this afternoon to talk about Wicked for Good. It's the kind of film that needs to be seen in a theater if you possibly can. We encourage you to go out to a theater and see it, because it's big, it's strong, and it's beautiful. Good luck in awards season coming up, everybody, and thank you for taking the time. And for you viewers out there, go watch all our videos. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.